The Amazon rainforest. It's a name that conjures images of incredible beauty, of life just bursting forth in a million different forms. But for those who have truly tested its limits, it's known by another name, the Green Hell. This isn't a park. It's not a gentle wilderness waiting to be explored. It is a vast, living, breathing entity, utterly indifferent to human survival. Every single second you spend here, the jungle is trying to reclaim you. The humidity is a physical weight, a suffocating blanket that never lifts day or night. It seeps into your clothes, your gear, and your very bones, breeding rot and decay with astonishing speed. This is a world of extremes. The sun can be a relentless hammer, beating down on the canopy, but very little of its light actually reaches the forest floor. Down below, it's a realm of perpetual twilight, a gloomy, damp world where your senses are constantly on high alert. The sounds are a symphony of the unknown. The shriek of a monkey, the buzz of a million insects, the rustle in the undergrowth that could be a harmless rodent or a stalking jaguar. The smells are just as potent, the sweet perfume of an orchid mixed with the pungent odor of decay. It's a sensory overload designed to confuse and intimidate, a place where nature, not man, makes all the rules. Navigating this labyrinth is a task that, honestly, just defies imagination. There are no landmarks, no clear paths. Every direction looks the same, an impenetrable wall of green. The ground itself is a treacherous trap, a tangled mess of roots, a swampy bog or a leaf-covered pitfall. Mighty rivers, the lifeblood of this forest, are also its most dangerous highways. They are home to piranhas, electric eels, and massive anacondas. To be lost here is to be truly lost, swallowed whole by an environment that has been perfecting its defenses for millions of years. It's a place that demands absolute respect, because one mistake, one moment of carelessness, is all it takes to become another forgotten part of the jungle floor. So what does it take to survive in a place like this? It's not about brute force. The jungle is stronger than any man. It's about intelligence, it's about adaptability, it's about becoming part of the environment, not fighting against it. You need to think like the predators you're trying to avoid and forage, like the creatures you're trying to emulate. It requires a mental fortitude that is almost superhuman, a will to live that can burn brighter than the fear that threatens to consume you. This is the story of one man who faced the Green Hell and, against all odds, refused to be broken by it. When you're facing the raw power of the Amazon, your first priority is always shelter. But on the jungle floor, true safety is really just an illusion. This is the domain of the jaguar, the territory of the venomous bushmaster snake, and the hunting ground for army ants that can strip a creature to the bone in minutes. Every shadow can hide a threat, and the damp ground is a breeding ground for disease, fungus, and parasites that can enter your body through the smallest cut. To stay on the ground is to offer yourself up as an easy meal or a convenient host. It's a gamble that, in the long run, you are guaranteed to lose. The risks are simply too great. This was the first and most critical lesson our survivor learned. He observed the jungle's own hierarchy. He watched the monkeys, the birds, the sloths. They lived their lives high above the dangers of the forest floor, in the sprawling, interconnected world of the canopy. The treetops were a different world, a place of relative safety, of sunlight, and of a different set of rules. It was a vertical kingdom, a fortress built of leaves and branches. The decision was not just a choice, it was a fundamental shift in strategy. He would not conquer the jungle, he would rise above it. This single, brilliant decision would be the cornerstone of his entire survival. Choosing to live in the trees presented its own monumental challenges. It meant abandoning the very ground beneath his feet, the one thing humans take for granted. It required learning to move with the grace and confidence of a primate, to trust vines that could snap and branches that could break. The heights were dizzying, and a single misstep would mean a fatal fall. But the advantages were undeniable. Up in the canopy, He was safe from the vast majority of the jungle's large land predators. He could see his surroundings, spot threats from a distance, and stay dry during the frequent torrential downpours that turned the forest floor into a muddy quagmire. So began his new life as a creature of the canopy. He wasn't just camping in a tree, he was making the tree his home, his fortress, and his entire world. It was a bold, almost insane strategy, but in the brutal logic of the Amazon, it was the only one that made sense. He was trading the familiar dangers of the ground for the unknown challenges of the heights. He was committing to a life lived between the earth and the sky, a solitary existence in a vertical world of his own making. This was not just about finding shelter for a night, it was about establishing a long-term defense against a relentless enemy. Who was this man? The jungle doesn't care about names or past lives. It only recognizes strength, weakness, and the will to endure. We know very little about where he came from or what circumstances led him to this profound isolation. Was he a scientist from a crashed plane, a lost explorer, or someone fleeing a past he could no longer face? The jungle keeps its secrets, and he became one of them. He was a ghost in the leaves, a whisper in the canopy, a solitary figure whose past was erased by the overwhelming present of daily survival. His identity was stripped away, replaced by a new one forged in the crucible of the wild. He was no longer a man from the outside world, he was a man of the trees. This profound loneliness is a challenge that can break even the strongest individuals. Survival isn't just about finding food and water, it's a mental game. The silence, broken only by the unfamiliar sounds of the jungle, can be deafening. The complete lack of human contact can lead to a slow unraveling of the mind. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months, with no one to talk to, no one to share the burden of fear with, no one to offer a word of encouragement. He had only his own thoughts for company, a constant internal dialogue that could be his greatest ally or his most destructive enemy. Keeping his mind sharp and focused was as crucial as keeping his body alive. He became a master of observation, not just of the jungle, but of himself. He had to be his own doctor, his own engineer, and his own psychologist. He would watch the changing light, the patterns of the rain, and the behavior of the animals, not just for survival cues, but to mark the passage of time, to give his days a structure that fought back against the encroaching chaos. His past was a distant memory, a dream he could barely recall. The future was an abstract concept, represented only by the next sunrise. All that mattered was the now, the branch beneath his feet, the sound of a potential threat, the gnawing hunger in his belly. Every day was a test of his resolve. There were no days off, no moments of rest where he could lower his guard. Sickness, injury, a moment of despair. Any of these could have been a death sentence. To survive alone for so long required a level of mental discipline that is difficult to comprehend. He didn't just endure the loneliness, he learned to live with it, to accept it as a fundamental condition of his existence. He was a solitary island of human consciousness in a vast sea of green, a testament to the fact that, even when utterly alone, the human spirit can find a way to hold on. A tree is not a home, but it can be made into one. With this simple truth as his guide, the survivor began the arduous process of building his sanctuary in the sky. He had no tools, no nails, no rope. His only resources were what the jungle provided and what his own ingenuity could create. The first task was to build a stable platform, a place where he could sleep without the constant fear of rolling over and falling to his death. He chose a spot in the crook of a massive kapok tree, where several large branches forked out, creating a natural foundation. He spent weeks, a man possessed by a singular purpose, hauling branches and weaving them together. He learned from the master builders of the jungle, the birds. He watched how they wove their nests, using flexible vines and strong fibers to create intricate, durable structures. He mimicked their techniques, painstakingly lashing branches together with tough liana vines. He stripped bark and used it to create a more solid, level floor. He used large waxy leaves from the understory, hauling them up one by one to create a waterproof roof. This wasn't a simple lean-to. It was a feat of primitive engineering, a nest built for a human, suspended dozens of feet in the air. It was his castle, his command center, and his only refuge from the relentless elements. Water, the source of all life, was his next great challenge. Descending to the forest floor to find a stream was a risk he could not afford to take every day. Again, he looked to the jungle for answers. He observed how the cupped leaves of bromeliads collected rainwater, creating miniature ecosystems for frogs and insects. He began to devise his own collection system. He strategically placed large leaves to act as funnels, channeling the frequent downpours into gourds and hollowed-out bamboo stalks he had painstakingly prepared. This system provided him with a steady supply of clean, fresh water, freeing him from his reliance on the dangerous world below. Every addition to his home was a victory, a small triumph against the overwhelming odds. He built storage compartments for food, woven from vines and protected from the rain. He created a designated spot for a small, carefully managed fire on a bed of clay and stone, a risky but essential tool for cooking and keeping insects at bay. His treetop haven was a constantly evolving project, a testament to his resourcefulness and his unyielding refusal to surrender. It was more than just a shelter. It was a symbol of his adaptation, a piece of human order carved out of the heart of the wild chaos. Living in the trees solved the problem of safety, but it created a new and pressing one: how to find food. The canopy is not a supermarket. While it offered some resources, sustenance was never guaranteed and had to be earned every single day. The survivor's diet became a carefully curated menu of whatever the treetops could provide. His primary source of protein came from insects, larvae, and bird eggs. He learned to break into termite nests, harvesting the protein-rich insects. He became adept at spotting the nests of birds, waiting patiently for the parents to leave before carefully taking a single egg, never enough to make them abandon the nest entirely. This was a delicate balancing act. He was not a mindless consumer. He was a careful predator, a forager who understood the intricate web of life around him. He watched the monkeys to see which fruits were safe to eat. Their instincts, honed over generations, became his guidebook. If the monkeys ate it, he knew it was likely safe for him to try in small amounts. He learned to identify dozens of different types of fruits, nuts, and edible leaves. Some were sweet and nourishing, others bitter and barely palatable, but all of them were fuel. Each meal was a reward for hours of patient observation and risky collection. The challenges were immense. Many plants in the Amazon are toxic, and a single mistake could lead to sickness or death. He developed a system. He would first touch a new plant to his skin to check for a reaction, then to his lips, then his tongue. If he experienced no irritation, he would eat a tiny amount and wait for 24 hours. This painstaking process of trial and error was slow and dangerous, but it was the only way to expand his menu and ensure his long-term survival. He was building his own internal encyclopedia of the jungle's edible resources, a catalogue written in the language of taste, texture, and consequence. Hunger was a constant companion, a dull ache that never truly went away. There were days of plenty when he would find a tree heavy with ripe fruit or a nest full of eggs. But there were also days of scarcity when storms raged or food was simply out of reach. On these days, he survived on his stored reserves and his own sheer willpower. The daily quest for food was more than just a physical necessity. It was a ritual that kept his mind sharp and his body active. It was a constant reminder that in the jungle, life is a gift that must be earned anew with every rising sun. While the canopy offered protection from large ground predators like jaguars, it was far from a risk-free environment. The jungle's dangers are not limited to what walks on four legs. In fact, some of its most lethal inhabitants were his new neighbors in the trees. Venomous snakes like the eyelash viper are masters of camouflage. their bodies blending perfectly with the vines and leaves. He had to learn to see the world in a new way, to scan every branch and vine, not just as a potential handhold, but as a potential threat. Every move had to be deliberate, every grab calculated. A single careless reach could result in a fatal bite, miles from any hope of medical help. The air itself was full of threats. Harpy eagles, the powerful apex predators of the canopy, were a constant presence. While they primarily hunt sloths and monkeys, a lone, slow-moving human in their territory was an unknown quantity. He learned to stay under the cover of thicker branches when he saw them circling, making himself a smaller, less obvious target. But the smaller predators were often the most relentless. He was under constant assault from insects, mosquitoes carrying malaria and dengue fever, stinging wasps with nests the size of footballs, and bullet ants whose sting is said to be the most painful in the world. Protecting himself from these tiny assailants was a full-time job. Beyond the predators, the environment itself was an enemy. The weather in the Amazon is violent and unpredictable. Tropical storms can materialize out of nowhere, with winds that can snap thick branches and lightning that can shatter entire trees. During these storms, his treetop home would sway and groan, and he could do nothing but hold on and pray that his careful construction would hold. Sickness was another ever-present fear. A simple infection from a scratch could turn deadly in the humid, bacteria-rich environment. A fever, a bout of dysentery from contaminated food, or a fungal infection on his skin were not mere inconveniences. They were life-threatening crises that he had to face alone. His survival depended on a state of constant heightened awareness. He developed a sixth sense for danger, an intuitive understanding of the jungle's rhythms. He learned the alarm calls of monkeys that signaled a nearby predator. He could smell the rain coming long before the first drop fell. He knew which parts of the canopy to avoid during certain times of day, and which vines were strong enough to hold his weight. He was no longer an intruder in this world. He was becoming a part of its complex ecosystem, a creature that survived not through strength, but through a deep and profound understanding of the risks that surrounded him. The Amazon is the world's most demanding teacher, and its lessons are taught in the unforgiving language of survival. For our survivor, every day was a new class, and the tuition for failure was death. He did not arrive in the jungle as an expert. He became one through relentless observation, painful trial and error, and an incredible capacity to learn and adapt. He was a student in the ultimate school of the wild, and his curriculum covered everything from botany and zoology to engineering and medicine. His intelligence was his greatest tool, allowing him to process the endless stream of information the jungle provided and turn it into life-saving knowledge. He became a master botanist out of necessity. He didn't just learn to identify edible plants, he learned their properties. He discovered which leaves could be crushed to create an insect repellent, which barks contained antiseptic sap to treat wounds, and which vines held a surprising amount of drinkable water. He learned to read the forest floor, not for a path, but for signs. A fallen fruit that indicated a tree above, a track that told him a wild pig had passed by recently. He was learning the jungle's secret language, a language spoken in broken twigs, overturned leaves, and the subtle changes in the quality of light. His understanding of animal behavior became incredibly sophisticated. He could distinguish between the casual chatter of monkeys and their sharp cries of alarm. He learned the flight patterns of different birds, knowing which ones indicated the presence of a fruiting tree and which ones signaled an approaching storm. This knowledge was his early warning system, allowing him to anticipate danger and opportunity alike. He was no longer just seeing animals. He was reading their behavior, interpreting their actions, and using that information to make critical decisions about his own safety and sustenance. He was a silent, watchful apprentice to the creatures of the canopy. This long, arduous education transformed him. The man who entered the jungle was gone, replaced by something new, something more resilient. He was no longer fighting the jungle. He was moving with it, in sync with its rhythms. His body grew leaner and stronger, his senses sharper than they had ever been. His mind, honed by constant problem-solving, became his most powerful weapon. The jungle had stripped him of everything he once was, but in its place it had given him the skills and the wisdom to survive. He had graduated from the jungle's classroom with the highest honor possible. He was still alive. For 6 years, the sun rose and set over the Amazon, and with each passing day, the man in the trees endured. 6 years. It's a span of time that is difficult to comprehend under such circumstances. 2,190 days of solitude, 2,190 days of constant vigilance, of gnawing hunger, and of relentless mental and physical challenge. He saw seasons change, not by a calendar, but by the shifting patterns of rainfall and the fruiting of different trees. He became a living part of the canopy, as much a fixture of his small territory as the ancient kapok tree that served as his home. His survival was not a passive act of waiting to be rescued. It was an active, dynamic process of becoming. He didn't just live in the jungle, he became one with it. His skin was tanned and scarred, a map of his struggles and triumphs. His muscles were lean and functional, conditioned by years of climbing and foraging. His mind was a finely tuned instrument, capable of processing the subtle cues of the forest that any normal person would miss. He had adapted so completely that the line between the man and his environment had begun to blur. He was a testament to the incredible plasticity of the human organism, our ability to change and adapt to even the most extreme conditions. What does a story like this teach us? It proves that human endurance is not just a myth. It is a profound and powerful reality. It shows that our capacity for ingenuity and resourcefulness runs deeper than we can possibly imagine. In a world that often feels over-sanitized and disconnected from nature, his tale is a stark reminder of the raw, untamed spirit that lies within us all. It demonstrates that when stripped of everything we think we need, technology, society, comfort, the human will to survive is the most essential tool we possess. His story is a monument to patience, to the power of observation, and to the quiet, stubborn refusal to give up. His 6 years alone in the trees were not just a story of survival, they were a story of life. He did not merely exist, he lived a rich, complex life. Governed by the laws of the jungle, he found a way to thrive in a place that should have killed him 1,000 times over. He stands as a powerful symbol of our species' resilience. Even when the world seems impossible, even when we are pushed to the absolute limits of our being, the human spirit can find a way not just to hold on, but to build a home, to find sustenance, and to greet each new sunrise with the unwavering determination